today? Good. Okay, so nice sunny day today, blue skies. I had somebody call me from Taipei. Actually, I was on ICRT on Tuesday morning to talk about, the radio station, English radio station, ICRT, to promote the COMPASS Festival this weekend. And the DJ asked me, he said, so what's the weather like down there? And I said, oh, it's clear. And he was very surprised because I think in Taipei it's been pretty bad the last few weeks, lots of rain. So, but regardless of whether we have rain or not this weekend, we'll see. I hope you all still join us. The event is going on, and we, as we say in English, the event is going on, rain or shine. That's usually what we say. And so I'll just show you one more time. This is our event. And it's taking place this Saturday and Sunday at Shiming Guangchang. And we'll be there from about 12 o'clock noon until roughly 9 o'clock, maybe 8:30 on Sunday. But anyhow, it's free, it's open. We have about 50个摊位, 50 vendor booths selling lots of food and drink. And we also have about 17 bands, 乐团. And so they're playing all kinds of music, jazz, rock, folk music. In fact, I just found out there's a duo, a two-person group, Americans. They're going to be doing music from the 19th century. So it's like folk music, Mingsu, folk music, American folk music. And so they'll be playing. And I found out one of the members of this duo his hometown is like right near my parents' hometown in Pennsylvania, Bingzhou. So it's kind of rare to meet someone who comes from near my parents' home. So anyhow, there's a lot of interesting music, and I hope you'll join us on Saturday and Sunday. And if you want any cards, we have these promotional cards here too. So yeah, lots of good fun. Okay, so let me check here. Miller, is there an issue here with how do I get the newspaper to show up? I'm seeing myself. Oh yeah, there we are. Okay, yeah. Right, okay. Okay, so thought we would start with a news article that's related to something everyone's talking about. Not to start on a negative note, but I'm sure many of you saw this big story from Korea. It's interesting when you see something like this happen. Obviously, it's a great tragedy, but it also makes me a bit angry because it seems like there was a problem with nobody, or the police especially, thought that this would be a problem with having so many people in such a compact place. But I think it's a good reminder. I saw something on TV in Taiwan in the local news, but I also saw something online. They were telling people to give them advice to what to do if you're ever stuck in a situation like this, what you should do to protect yourself. I know that, it seems like there's not much you can do because you're so crowded and packed in with everybody else. But they gave some very useful ideas about what you can do to basically stay alive. So anyhow, when I saw what happened, obviously it's a great tragedy, and it's upsetting because not just because it was tragedy, but people were out to have a good time. It was supposed to be fun. Most of these people were very young. And actually most of them, I think almost twice as many women as men were killed. So so anyhow, let's read this. There's some interesting words that we can learn from this. Okay, so the headline says, Seoul probing police inaction in crush. Now, you know what a crush is, right? What does that mean? Yeah, you can crush many things, right? Whenever I drink soda, or a can of something, I always crush the can before I throw it away because I think maybe if I crush it, it will make it smaller in the garbage, right? Won't take up as much space. So I always crush my cans before I throw them away. You can crush paper, you can crush anything. You know, when you have an old car and then you send it to the junkyard, they usually crush the car into a small box of metal, and then they throw it off to the recycling. So crushing means to push or crush, make smaller. Smash is to more like to break, but crush is to compact, to make smaller. Okay, so why don't we say a word together? Crush. Crush. Now this word's very funny, and I was waiting for somebody to mention this, but crush, there's another less common usage for the word crush. And I don't know if any of you know what that is. There's a completely different meaning for this word, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. So if you say you have a crush on somebody, what does that mean? You're attracted to them. Usually it has the idea of being attracted to them, but maybe not. It's not like it's almost not like I'll give you a word that is kind of a good it's a longer word, but it's a word that we use sometimes. We say, yeah. Okay. Infatuation or infatuated with. Infatuation, of course, is a noun, and you can say he is infatuated with someone, okay? That means you have this real, like he said, fascination. You're just completely, all you can think about is that person. Now, maybe you might not even know them, right? Maybe you've never talked to them. Not necessarily. I mean, it could turn into something longer term, but it's usually the starting point, right? It's the beginning. So, and the word crush, for some reason, is used more often with young people, you know, with kids, with students, with young, you know, we often say, you know, someone might say, I remember my first crush in school. It means the first person that you really, really liked, you know, usually somebody from the opposite sex. So, yeah, so we can say you have a crush. We say have. This is not usually a verb in that regard. Usually we say we have a crush on somebody. But then this word is good too. It's similar. You say he is infatuated with. Okay. So again, a crush on somebody or infatuated with somebody. Okay. Or you have an infatuation. Okay. So let's say that word too. First of all, infatuated. Infatuated with. Okay, now remember that T has a ch sound. Okay, and then the noun, let's say infatuation. Infatuation. Right, okay. So I sometimes joke when I'm explaining to people, when I'm introducing Taiwan to people, foreigners who are moving here, they ask me, they say, what do Taiwanese think about other countries, right? And so they might ask me, what do they think about Americans or Chinese but when I talk about Japan, I always say Taiwanese are almost infatuated with Japan. Every Taiwanese person I talk to, almost, it seems like they think, oh, Japan is amazing. I love Japan. I go to Japan 2 times a year. So it's kind of a joke, but I say Taiwanese are infatuated with Japan. And so in that regard, it's not a person, it's a place. They're infatuated with a place. They just love this place. Okay. So, yes. Yeah. A what? Yeah. Yeah. Crash. CRASH, like an accident. So when you crash, it means you come down. I mean, obviously it means you can smash into something, but also means if your energy level is very high and then suddenly it drops, we say my energy crashed or I crashed. Simply, you can say that way. Clash is a conflict. So you can say we clashing personalities. So he's asking about 2 words here they sound a little bit similar. Clash means to oppose or to have a conflict with somebody. So you can say we have clashing personalities. His gushing and my gushing are opposites. They don't get along with each other. So we clash with each other, or they're clashing as a 形容词, ing. But crash, like an accent, what he's talking about is if you have your energy goes up and then it crashes. You can say his after coffee crash, like when you drink coffee, sometimes your energy level goes way up and then suddenly it just drops and it crashes. So anyhow, those are similar words. I mean, they sound similar. They don't mean the similar thing. Okay. So anyhow, these are some words starting with this word crush. So here again, let's go back to the headline. It says Seoul, of course, means Korea, the Korean government. Probing, and we've talked about this before. What does probe mean? Investigate. Yeah, to 调查. So probing, let's say it together, probing. And of course, the 名词 can also be probe, P-R-O-B-E. There's a probe or investigation. Okay, so police inaction. What does inaction mean? I think you can tell. What does that mean? Yeah. Right. It's the opposite of action, right? So action is good. Well, not always good, but action is active. But inaction means you're just sitting there. You're not doing anything. So you can say, why is there so much inaction about this problem? Why is nobody doing anything? So let's say that to inaction. Inaction. Okay, so let's go on. It says, special investigation. People called the police several times, warning about large crowds in the Itaewon area. But officers did nothing about it, phone records showed. Okay, so this is obviously a problem. People were actually calling the police. Okay, let's read this. I'll read this. It says, South Korea's prime minister yesterday said that police must explain failures to respond to multiple emergency calls ahead of a deadly Halloween crowd surge as investigators raided police stations. Okay, so that's pretty serious if investigators are raiding police stations. And we've talked about this before. What's a raid? Yeah, it could be a surprise attack if it was a war, or it could be a surprise, you go in and you take, like the police. We see this on the news sometimes. The police will raid a business or raid a store or raid an office. They'll go in unannounced, surprise visit, and they'll take evidence usually. They're looking for something. Okay, so we call that a raid. So investigators are not raiding some criminal organ. They're raiding a police station, which is interesting. Okay, so he said yesterday that the police must explain failures. Okay, why did they fail? To do what? To respond, to react, to do something to multiple emergency calls. Now, multiple, of course, means many. Yeah, several, many. Okay, why don't we say it together? Multiple. Multiple. Okay, and of course, an emergency calls in Taiwan, you call 119, right? In America, what do you call? 911. Yeah, I don't. Whenever I explain that, people are like, I don't get it. Why is it backwards? Yeah. So yeah, I know EEGO. It sounds like different. I notice in Korea it's also EEGO. So yeah, you have to be the opposite. Yeah. Yeah, Japan is EEGO also, right? Yeah. So anyhow, ahead of the deadly Halloween, of course, Halloween is, we all know, I think Halloween, crowd surge. Now, we've talked about this word many times. Surge means a rapid, large increase, right? We could say the water is surging. After the heavy rain, the river surged. It means the river got very high and very fast. You could say the stock market, 股市 is surging. It's going up very quickly. So, but here, of course, we're talking about people, a crowd. So why don't we say that word one more time? Surge. Surge. Okay, so let's read this. South Korea's prime minister yesterday said that police must explain failures to respond to multiple emergency calls Ahead of a deadly Halloween crowd surge. Surge. As investigators raided police stations. Okay. So it says here at least 156, mostly young people, were killed and scores more injured in a crush late on Saturday at the first post-COVID-19 pandemic Halloween party in Seoul's popular Itaewon nightlife district. Okay. I don't know if you've been to Itaewon. I've been there. It's a very popular part of the city. You know, maybe it'd be a little bit like in Taipei, maybe like Tianmu, or it's not like right downtown, but it's a very popular area. The reason why Itaewon, I think, became very well known is the U.S. Army used to have very large, their biggest base was right there. The GD was right in Itaewon. And so lots of American soldiers would live and work in that station there. But now I believe the U.S. Army has moved most of its base outside of Seoul. They still have a few small bases in that area, but they moved their main base outside of Seoul. So, but Itaewon was very popular for shopping. And I remember the one thing you could always buy in Itaewon, my friends all said, if you go to Itaewon, you have to buy this. And it was leather jackets, leather clothing. Like if you wanted to buy a leather jacket, you know, that was the place to go. And so I remember I went to Itaewon to buy a leather jacket because they were, you know, it was good quality and it was nice. But I don't know if they still sell leather jackets there. Probably, hopefully. Okay. So anyhow, back to the story. It says they were scores more. So 156 mostly young. Of course, that means they were mostly young. Most of them were young people. And scores more injured. And what's score mean? It's a number, right? But it means when we say scores of something, it means many, many. Okay. I'm trying to remember what exactly is actually technically there's a number attached specifically to score. I believe, is it 20? I guess it is, because I'll tell you why this word is very, very well known to many Americans. I think we've read this long time ago, but there was a very famous battle during the American Civil War called Gettysburg. It was considered the turning point of the war. And Abraham Lincoln, you know, President Lincoln, gave a very, it's probably one of the most famous speeches in American history called the Gettysburg Address. This is his speech. And at the very beginning of the speech, he says, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth this nation. It means that 77 years ago, our fathers, means our national fathers, brought forth this nation, started this nation. So if score is 20 years, then that means 40 would be 80 years, 87 years ago. So I presume that's correct. But anyhow, when we say scores, it just means, you know, like 几十个, you know, means lots, many. Okay. So scores more injured in a crush late on Saturday at the first post-COVID-19 pandemic Halloween party. So this is the first Halloween party after the pandemic. You know, if you watch the videos, see the videos that they show, I don't think anyone's wearing, well, most people are not wearing masks. They're wearing Halloween masks, but they're not wearing, like in Taiwan, where everybody's wearing 戴口罩. Okay. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So let's read this then. At least 156, mostly young people, were killed and scores more injured in a crush late on Saturday at the first post-COVID-19 pandemic Halloween party. Halloween party in Seoul's popular Itaewon nightlife district. Right. Okay. So it says here transcripts of emergency calls obtained by, I don't know how to pronounce that word, Agence, it means agency, but Agence France Presse, many made hours before disaster struck, document rising desperation over crowd density. Okay, so first of all, what's a transcript? Yeah, basically, I'll give you an example. If someone does a 采访, like I used to be a 记者, well, I still kind of am a 记者, but when you interview somebody, after you might record, you record their words, and then you go home or go to your office and you turn the words into writing. Okay, I'll tell you, it's a lot of 麻烦. I've done so much transcription because you have to listen to it and then type what they're saying, and type it, write it all down. And so we say to transcribe. So if you want to turn that word into a verb, we say to transcribe. Oops. Oop. There we go. Yeah, to transcribe. Okay, so it means to write down, to listen to something and write it down so that it's in writing. Okay, so why don't we say it together? To transcribe. To transcribe. Yeah, so if you are a researcher or a writer, academic or a writer, or doing a report, often you have to transcribe things because you talk to people or listen to something and then you have to write it down. So why don't we say this word? This is the document. This is the actual document. Let's say it together. Transcripts. Transcripts. Okay, so these are writing documents, written records of emergency calls obtained by AFP, Agence France Presse, which I'm saying completely wrong, I'm sure. But anyhow, what does obtain mean? Yeah, to get. Okay, so this is a news agency. They got these transcripts. And many of these transcripts were made hours before disaster struck, before this disaster happened. This even hours beforehand, they were already calling. Document rising desperation. So document, I think is like a 文件, right? But here it's not a noun, it's what? It's a verb, right? So the verb becomes, we say to document something, right? It means to make a record of something, okay? So usually in writing, okay, you create a document. So you can say he documented the history of his family, okay? Some families, they like to write down their family history. Okay, long time ago, we came from here, and then this person, and there's a document. So we say they documented the history of their family, or they documented what happened on that day. Okay, so this is a verb. This transcript documented the rising, increasing, growing desperation. Okay, and you know what desperate means, right? Desperate means you really getting worried and afraid and about something, or you really need something. You can say he's desperate for food because he's very hungry. He's desperate for water because the water stopped. He's desperate for a new job. But here, desperation is a noun. It's not a verb. Over what? Over crowd density. And what does density mean? It's thickness. It's hard to describe. How do you say in Chinese? Yeah. So yeah, how dense it is, right? I'll give you an example. This is a very simple example. I think most of you probably like to eat bread, right? 面包, right? So if you go to the 7-Eleven, you buy that white bread, it's very light, right? But I don't know if you've ever had German bread, 德国面包. It's like black and it's heavy. It's very, very dense. With the 7-Eleven 面包, you can eat maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 pieces and it's okay. German bread, you eat one piece and 已经吃饱了, right? You're like, oh, I can't eat anymore. It's so heavy. It's so dense, okay? Usually cheese and meat. What? Well, I hope so, because it's very dry. I remember when I was eating German bread, I was like, I need water, I need something, maybe I need beer, because it's so heavy and so dry, and the cheese is dry, and the meat is dry, everything's dry. So yeah, it's like you need a lot of maybe beer. I don't know. So yeah, why don't we say together density? Density. Okay, or the word dense, D-E-N-S-E. Let's say it also, dense, dense. Right, so you could say the crowd was very dense. Okay, but here we say crowd density, which is a noun. Okay, dense is a 形容词. Okay, now I will say, when I was a kid, when I was much younger, if you said that someone was dense, it means they were stupid. Okay, 笨蛋, right? If you say, oh, he's really dense, okay, it means he's dumb. Okay, we don't say that too much anymore. It's not a very common expression, but when I was a kid, people used to say that. Yeah. What? Thick? Yeah. It'd be similar. If you said someone's very thick, thick means 很厚, right? So thick, Thick. We don't hear that much anymore, but if someone said, oh, he's really thick, it means he's also stupid. 笨蛋. Okay, so yeah, dense or thick. Yeah, if someone is that way. But yeah, here that people are getting more and more desperate. They're getting more and more worried or afraid about crowd density. Okay, it's getting more and more crowded. Okay, so let's read this together. Transcripts of emergency calls obtained by Agence France Presse. Many made hours before disaster struck. Let's say it again. Disaster struck. Document rising desperation. Desperation over crowd density. Density. Right. Okay. So yeah, people were getting more and more worried. Okay, this is a photo caption. So let's go on. It says, officials had earlier said the first call to the fire department about the crush was received at 10:15 p.m. on Saturday. But the transcripts show someone called the police emergency hotline at 6:34 p.m. asking for help. Wow, so that's almost 4 hours earlier. Okay, now of course, hotline is a 热线, right? So they called the police emergency hotline. Let's see here. Yeah, so anyhow, let's read this. Officials had earlier said the first call to the fire department about the crush was received at 10:15 p.m. on Saturday. But the transcripts show someone called the police emergency hotline at 6:34 p.m. asking for help. Okay. So it says here an estimated 100,000 people had flocked to the area, but because it was not an official event with a designated organizer, neither police nor other local authorities were actively managing the crowd. Okay, so of course, estimated means what? Yeah, kind of like we're guessing. We think probably, maybe, whenever there's a big crowd, we can estimate the size of the crowd. Like sometimes people ask me, how many people came to COMPASS Festival? And I say, well, I estimate about 15 to 20,000 people. Or, the Jazz Festival. And I say, well, we estimate 1 million people over 9 days. That's estimate. Or if you want to turn it into a 名词, estimation, T-A T-I-O-N, estimation. Let's say it together, estimated. Estimated. And then as a means, estimation. Estimation. Okay, so an estimated 100,000 people had flocked to the area. Now, what does flocked mean? A large group of people. When lots of people go to a place, we say they flock. What does the word flock mean? Birds. We can also say that. We can also use the word flock for sheep. Yang, a flock of sheep, right? A flock of birds. It means a large group of birds or sheep. Probably goats too, yang. Both, goats or sheep, any kind of yang. So we say a flock. Now for cows, what do we say? Herd, H-E-R-D, a herd of cows, a herd of cattle. But for sheep, we often say a flock of sheep, or we said like a flock of birds. Okay, so why don't we say the word flock? Flock. Okay, now here, of course, this turns into a verb, 动词. So if you're like a large group going somewhere, we say they flocked to the place or the location. Okay, so had flocked to the area, this Itaewon area. But because this was not an official event, no one said, oh, we're having an official event with a designated organizer. Of course, organizers, obviously, like I'm the organizer, or my company is the organizer of COMPASS Festival. Designate means when you specify specifically, you say they are the organizer. So you could say he is designated as the leader for this group. She was designated to do this job. It means she was assigned or specifically told that that is her job or position. So when we say designated organizer, there wasn't a company or person who was specifically organizing this event. So to designate means almost like to assign or to give something to someone. Okay, so let's say it together. And of course, this is not like the word design, because here we don't pronounce the G, but this word we pronounce the G. There's a G sound. So let's say it together. Designated. Designated. Okay, so there was no designated organizer. Neither police nor, okay, so here we have neither nor. Sometimes we say either or, but this is neither nor. Neither the police nor other local authorities, other local officials or groups, government organizations were actively managing the crowd. Now, what's the opposite of actively? Yeah, passively. So, these two words are often used as opposites. So we say passively, okay? Passively means you're just kind of standing there, right? So let's say, to actively manage the crowd. If you're actively managing the crowd, you're doing something. Like, I think this is something that Taipei has done pretty well for, like, the New Year's fireworks, Yanhuo, right? For Taipei 101, there's police actively managing the crowd. They're stopping people. They're saying, okay, you have to wait, and now you can go, and they're doing stuff. But if you're passively there, you're just kind of standing there. You're not doing anything. You're just kind of watching people and, I guess hoping that nothing happens, but you're not taking action. So why don't we say together, actively, actively, passively, passively. Yeah, and P-A-S-S-I-V-E, passive. If someone is very passive, it means that they're not really, they're not active, right? So you can say if someone's a very passive person, it means they don't generally take action, or they don't take action before something happens. They just kind of react to something. They're very passive, okay? So this is a good word to know. Okay, so why don't we read this together? An estimated 100,000 people had flocked to the area. But because it was not an official event, with a designated organizer, organizer, neither police nor other local authorities. Authorities were actively managing the crowd. Oh, the crowd. Yeah, the group of people. Okay. So it says here, this is a quote. When each citizen makes an emergency call, it is when they are very urgent and in dire need of help or action from the police. South Korean Prime Minister Han Duck-soo told a government meeting yesterday. So, of course, when each citizen, now I've said this before, a citizen, normally when I think of a citizen, it means that you are officially a part of that country, right? But often when I write articles about Taichung, I like to use the word resident, because resident means that you live here. Citizen means that you actually have a Taiwanese passport, right? For example, I am a resident of Taichung, but officially I'm not a citizen of Taiwan. I'm a U.S. citizen, okay? So resident is a broader word, but here, of course, he's just, sometimes people use both words. So why don't we say that word again? Citizen. Citizen. Okay, so he says when a citizen makes an emergency call, it is when they are very urgent. Now, I wouldn't say when they are very urgent. That's not exactly the language. I would say when something is urgent, like, or they feel very urgent, or they feel there's something urgent. We don't usually say someone is urgent. Right, yeah, urgent matter. I have an urgent matter, or there is urgency as a 名词. Urgent, urgency, urgency. You could say there's great urgency for you to do this, to finish this, okay? Or there's a lot of urgency about completing this project. Okay, so anyhow, he says, maybe this is just the way he's talking. So it says, when they are very urgent and in dire need of help or action. So dire means what? Yeah, desperate. You could say, remember the word we just learned, desperate, or you could say in very serious need of something. Dire means that it's a very, very serious situation. Like that you could say, I'm in dire need of emergency help. He is in dire need of a doctor. It means you need a doctor right now, okay? It's a serious emergency. So when something is very dire can be, it's a 形容词. There's a dire situation, or this is very dire. It means it's, yeah, it could be very dangerous. It's dire straits. Yeah, that's a very common expression. Just means in a very desperate situation. Well, it is a rock and roll band, but it's not. That's the name they chose. So yeah. So anyhow, let's say this word together: dire. Dire. Okay, we could say the situation is dire, or there is a dire situation. Okay, so dire need of help or action from the police. Okay, yeah. So normally you don't call the emergency number, 119 unless you really need something. Although, I know in America, probably Taiwan too, sometimes people call 119 or 911 when there is not a dire need, right? I've watched, there was a TV show, I think, in America that actually showed recordings of funny emergency calls. People call the 911 for stupid reasons, right? There was, I mean, literally, I saw one where somebody was in the 厕所 and they ran out of 卫生纸, and they called 911 and they said, you need to give me more toilet paper. So yeah. So anyhow, this is crazy, but yeah, hopefully they don't do that too much. Okay, so let's read this. When each citizen makes an emergency call, it is when they are very urgent and in dire need of help or action from the police. South Korean Prime Minister Han Duk-soo told a government meeting yesterday. Okay. The government will sternly hold accountable those who were responsible as soon as the investigation is completed, he said. Okay, stern, what does stern mean? Or sternly, what does that mean? Very severe, very serious. You know, if someone has a very stern look on their face or a very stern expression, it means they look very serious. You know, when you were a child, if you did something wrong and your parents were looking at you with a very sternly, or they talked to you very sternly, or they treated you, it means it was very serious, very, very like you were in trouble, right? So let's say together, stern, stern, sternly, sternly. So they will sternly hold accountable. Now, when you hold someone accountable, what does that mean? Yeah. So it's very similar to this word here. If you say he is being held accountable, it means he is being held responsible. You know, what are you accountable for in life? Okay, most people would say, well, maybe you're accountable to take care of your family, right? Or you're accountable to obey the law. You know, you're responsible to obey the law. There's many things we are accountable for. But if there's something happens like this, there's a disaster, who is held accountable means who is held responsible. Who is responsible for this situation? Whose job was it? Okay, so let's say together, hold accountable. Hold accountable. Now we could simply say they are accountable or he is accountable, that we can say it that way. So that we'll sternly hold accountable those who were responsible as soon as this investigation is completed. Okay, so let's read this. The government will sternly hold accountable. Accountable. Those who were responsible as soon as the investigation is completed. Completed, he said. Okay. So it says here a wide-ranging probe is underway into the exact cause of the crush, and an investigative team raided multiple police offices, including in the district where the disaster happened. Okay, so a wide-ranging, of course. What's the simple word for wide-ranging? Wide, or there's another word similar? Big, but even better, I think, also starts with a B. Broad, yes, broad, B-R-O-A-D, broad, very wide, very broad. So we could simply say a broad probe, you know, it's covering many things, is investigation, of course, that's what that means, is underway. It means we could say it is, remember we learned the word it is. If we say something is underway, we could say it is ongoing. I don't know, sometimes, I think usually it's hyphenated with that a dash, ongoing. Maybe that some people might spell the word to one word, but anyhow, it is ongoing. Why don't we say it together? It is ongoing. It is underway. Okay, so it's happening. It's going on right now. Into the exact cause of the crush, okay? You know, exactly what happened. Why did this happen? Okay, so they raided several, multiple, I guess we could say several. Okay, so let's read this. A wide-ranging probe is underway into the exact cause of the crush, and an investigative team raided multiple police offices, including in the district where the disaster happened. Oh, yeah. Well, we could, excuse me, we could say including those because it's offices. So including those or including the office, the office in the district. Okay. But we could say, I think this is also okay, including in the district. Yeah. Or yeah, if you want to be more complete, including the office in the district. Okay. Or the one in the district. Okay. Where the disaster happened. Okay. Okay, it says a special investigation team is conducting a raid on 8 agencies. Okay, I don't think we need to read that. It's just a bunch of names. Okay, so let's go on here. It says the government also said that it would revamp the police 112. Okay, I didn't know it was 112. 112 emergency call service. The government will do its best to create a safer society by using this accident as a lesson, said Park Jong-hyun of the South Korean Ministry of the Interior and Safety. This would be like the Neijangbu, I guess. So I guess, in Taiwan, I guess it's 110 for the police, right? But in Korea, it's 112. I didn't know that. That's interesting. I wonder why they chose 112 for their police emergency service. So what does revamp mean? Yeah, it means to kind of to do something to make it better, to improve it. Yeah, I guess that'd be a good way of saying it. If you say we're going to revamp our services, or we're going to revamp our the plan, the qihua, or we're going to revamp. It means to make it better, to change it, to make it better. Yeah. I don't know if that's actually a word we would use by itself, to vamp. Not to my knowledge, or at least it's not a word we use today, maybe long time ago. But yeah, you would think with revamp there would be the word vamp, but revamp is usually the word we usually use. So again, it means to change something, to usually because you want to make it better, you want to improve it. Okay, so why don't we say it together? Revamp. Revamp. Okay. Yeah. So they want to learn from this mistake. Okay. So let's read this. The government also said that it would revamp the police 112 emergency call service. The government will do its best to create a safer society by using this accident as a lesson. Said Park Jong-hyun of the South Korean Ministry of the Interior and Safety. Okay, let's say it last part. Interior and safety. Okay. Now, interior, of course, can mean many things. Like right now, we are in the interior of this classroom. We're inside. But of course, when we say Neijangbu or Ministry of the Interior, we're talking about, well, you know what it means. I mean, the interior of the country, what's inside the country. Okay. Like there's some people, I'm sure their whole job is called interior decorating or interior designing. Means they design the inside of a room or a house or a building to make it look nice, hopefully. Okay. So the emergency call transcripts show how desperate members of the public repeatedly flagged dangerous overcrowding for several hours before the crush happened. Let's read this too. At 8:09 p.m., one caller told police, "There are too many people here being pushed, trampled, hurt. It's chaotic. You need to control this." Okay, so, excuse me, once again, we have these transcripts. how desperate members of the public repeatedly, of course that means what? Over and over again, flagged, okay, dangerous overcrowding. Now, of course, before we say that, look at that word. Overcrowding, of course, I think you know what that means, right? If you say this room is overcrowded, it means there's too many people here, right? And so, of course, here it's a 名词, overcrowding. Okay, you could say there's lots of dangerous overcrowding at the event or on the street. Okay, but what is this word flagged? This is kind of interesting. What does that mean? Yeah, it means to kind of specify, to note something, right? It's almost like you're waving a flag. When I think of this word, I'll tell you what I think of. Nowadays, and when we use Google Maps, and you want to show somebody where something is, you pin it, right? You put a pin on Google Maps. You can specify. But when you flag something, it's a little bit the same idea, meaning that you're specifically telling somebody that is something you have to pay attention to. You have to 要注意到那个东西. Yeah, so you could say he flagged the shortage of food. It means he specifically mentioned that and said you have to pay attention to that. So it's almost like you're waving a flag and saying, look, watch that, be careful about that, pay attention. Yeah, it's like to call attention to. So does everybody understand that? Okay, so they repeatedly flagged dangerous overcrowding for several hours before the crush happened. So one caller told the police, there are too many people here being pushed, of course. Now, trampled, what does that mean? Yeah, it means to be stepped on, okay? So it's a word that we use very broadly, too. So obviously, if someone can be trampled, like here, of course, they could be trampled to death, right? It means people are stepping on them and it kills them. But this word also means I'll use an example. We say China often seems to trample on human rights, 人权. So if you're trampling on somebody's rights or their 人权 or whatever, it means you're stepping on them. You're abusing. That's a good word. Abusing, abuse, right? Abuse, abuse, to misuse, to use in the wrong way. But you're trampling, you're suppressing, you're oppressing somebody's human rights or their rights, their freedom. Trampling on freedom, that's another expression. To trample on someone's freedom, okay? Their 自由. Okay, so here, of course, it means they're literally, not figuratively, but literally being trampled on, stepped on. Okay, so why don't we say that word together? Trampled. Trampled. Okay. Now, of course, chaotic means 乱, right? It is 很乱. Yeah, it's chaotic. Let's say that too. Chaotic. Chaotic. Okay. So let's read this together. The emergency call transcripts. Transcripts show how desperate members of the public repeatedly flagged dangerous overcrowding. Let's say those two parts again. Repeatedly flagged dangerous overcrowding for several hours before the crush happened. Okay. At 8:09 p.m., one caller told police, there are too many people here being pushed, trampled, hurt. It's chaotic. You need to control this. Okay. I just want to note members of the public, okay? That seems like a funny way to say it, but we often use that expression. We could say, obviously we're talking about individuals, right? Specific people. We could simply say the public, But here, of course, we're talking about specific people called the police, right? So we say members of the public, okay? Specific individuals. I mean, we could simply say people, right? But members of the public is a very common expression. So why don't we say it one more time? Members of the public. Okay, so yeah. So here it says, and at 10:11 p.m., just moments before the crush, another person reported, it looks like people are getting crushed to death here. Total mayhem, okay? Now, this word mayhem is I don't think we've ever looked at this word before. What does that last word mean, mayhem? Yeah, it's very similar to the word chaos. But mayhem is actually even more crazy than chaos, right? You could say something's a little bit luan, or this is kind of chaotic. But if you say mayhem, it really means out of control. Out of control. So if you say there's complete mayhem in the street, or there's mayhem at the concert, or it means that if people are out of control, there's no control. It's complete chaos. Okay, so it's a more serious word than chaos. Okay, so let's say that word together: mayhem. Mayhem. So here they say total mayhem, complete mayhem, complete chaos. Okay, obviously, if people are getting crushed to death, that is complete chaos. It's very bad. Okay, so let's read this together. And at 10:11 p.m., just moments before the crush, another person reported, it looks like people are getting crushed to death there. Total mayhem. Okay. So it says here a handful of top officials, including the police chief, Seoul mayor, and the interior minister, issued public apologies on Tuesday, admitting they had failed to prevent the fatal disaster. Of course, fatal means deadly. We could say D-E-A-D-L-Y, deadly disaster, fatal disaster. Okay, why don't we say together, fatal. Fatal. Okay, so there's another word that's kind of similar, but it's used in a slightly different way, and that's the word lethal. So it's interesting because the word deadly could be used for lethal or fatal, but fatal means it results in death. It's going to kill somebody. But lethal means it's more like the potential, the ability to kill something or someone, okay? So we could say a lethal weapon. That's obviously was very famous movie from the 1980s. But lethal means it has the ability. It can kill somebody. So you could say taking drugs can be lethal to lethal to you. You don't have to say lethal to. It could be lethal. Period. Okay. Lethal weapon, lethal force. Anything that could kill somebody. But fatal usually means it's happened. It's done. Someone died. Okay. So similar, deadly can be used either way. So why don't we say together, lethal, lethal, fatal, fatal, deadly. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's read this then. Yeah, of course, to issue usually means to put out, right? They're issuing. You could say they made or they issued public apologies. Okay, a handful of top officials, including the police chief, Seoul mayor, and the interior minister, issued public apologies on Tuesday, admitting they had failed to prevent the fatal disaster. Disaster. Right. Okay. Okay, so I think that's enough for this story. But yeah, it's a real terrible tragedy to see this. I read another article. It said on that day in that area there were exactly 137 police. 137. So more people were killed than there were police there on the scene. So that 137 police is not enough for a crowd of 100,000 people. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, it's terrible. Hopefully everyone learns from this. I know that in Taiwan, I was watching the news and they were saying, obviously Taiwan, especially in Taipei, when they have those huge events, they should, obviously, I think they're doing a better job here in Taiwan than they did, obviously, on that day in Korea. So, yeah, too bad. It's really sad. But yeah, one thing is kind of good, though. I mean, good in a sad way, but it was interesting, like I said earlier, to read that to read that article or watch on TV. They said if you get knocked down in a crowd, you should put your elbows around your head, so that your elbows are protecting your head, and you should curl up so that your this part of your body is so if you're in a ball, then this part of your body, there's a space there because people can't breathe, right? That's the problem. They're getting crushed. But another one that was very interesting was I saw another expert, and they said if you're standing up, you take your fist and you put your hand over your other fist like this, and you put it in front of your chest like that, because that creates a space to allow you to breathe. Because if your chest is getting pushed, you can't breathe. So do this. And then he said if you're with a small group of friends, people can actually, if you're able to, lock arms. When we say lock arms, it means you put your arms and you face inward, like you're facing the other people. So everyone's facing, you have like a small circle and everyone's facing inward. That way you can also breathe, and people are pushing from the outside, you're still this way. So yeah, I thought that was good advice because I'd never seen that. I'd never read about that before. So yeah, really bad. I mean, yeah. Okay, so let's go back to another article I was looking at today. Another, where is this? Oh, yeah, here we are. So this is an interesting story, this one, because, Iran has had many protests over the last, 10 years or so. And most of them kind of, they happen and then they go away, or they stop, or they're suppressed by the government. But this one seems to keep going and going and going. And I think the Iranian government is starting to get a bit worried because it's not stopping. In fact, it might be spreading, which is interesting. It's always interesting how, we say it only takes a spark sometimes to start something big, a big change. You know what a spark is, right? S-P-A-R-K, a spark. So, it's a very common expression. We say it only takes a spark to start a fire. So, when you have a fire, you have that little piece of fire that flying through the air, and they can start a much, much bigger fire, like a forest fire or a building or something. So we say a spark. Why don't we say together, spark? Spark. Okay. So, in situations like, we don't know how this is going to end, but sometimes it's just one thing, and I think this story. One young woman died after the police arrested her for not wearing a head covering. Okay, so it'd be interesting that one spark started this very big, serious protest against the government across Iran. Okay, so let's read this. There's some words here we can learn. It says Iranians defiant despite crackdown. Okay, now what does that word defiant mean? Where does this word come from? We've talked about this before. Yes, to defy, right? So if you defy someone, it means you do not obey them, or you show your opposition to them. Okay, I think I've said very often a very common place where you see defiance is children, right? Sometimes children will defy their parents, right? Their parents say you need to do that, or you need to stop doing that, and the child says no, or they just keep doing it, right? You know, that might be a very small child, or it might be a very adult child, right? Maybe maybe if someone's parents say you cannot marry that person. You know, you cannot get married, and the son or daughter says, no, I'm going to marry them. I'm going to defy you, right? So yeah, we say to defy. So from that word we have defiant, which is a 形容词. So we can say they are defiant, okay, as a 形容词. Or if you want to turn that into a noun, we say defiance. Okay? To show defiance, okay? To show defiance towards somebody. Okay. So let's read the first one up there on to defy. To defy. And then under that, defiance. Defiance. And then this word, defiant. Defiant. Okay, so they're defiant. Of course, they're defying their government, okay? Defiant despite, in spite of the crackdown. Of course, the government's trying to stop this protest, to crack down on this protest. Okay, so here it says, this is an interesting word, theocratic regime. The demonstrations have showed no sign of abating, with people rallying in residential areas, on major avenues, and at universities nationwide. Now, this word here, I don't think we've ever studied this. What does theocratic mean? Yeah, we know the word democratic, right? So, you know, we've 民主, you know, Taiwan is democratic, the U.S. is democratic, or mostly democratic. We have democratic. There's another word we hear a lot, especially when we talk about countries like China or Russia. We say autocratic, okay? So democratic, you know, right? Autocratic means what? One person or a very small group of people is in charge. They're running everything, okay? But then theocratic means it's your country or your society or your country is being run by a religious group. Because theo, T-H-E-O, refers to God, you know? Like if you go to, sometimes people go to that, what is it, 神学院, right? And they study theology. Theology is the study of religion, okay? Theology, okay? Or I guess you could say the study of God, but theology or religion. So theocratic means your government is run by a group of, it's by a religious group or leaders, okay? And of course in Iran, there's this group of, I guess they use the word Ayatollah. This is an Iranian word that is still being used today. It's a leader of the country, is a religious leader. Of course, they also have a president, but the religious leader is more powerful. Okay? So let's say this word, theocratic. Theocratic. And then say those two words too, democratic. Democratic. Autocratic. Autocratic. And then this word here, this area of study, theology. Theology. Okay, so if you could say he majored in theology. You don't have to go to a 神学院 like we say seminary or religious school. You could be at a normal university. I don't know about Taiwan, but in America, some universities offer degrees in theology. I've met people who went to like Princeton University or Harvard University or Yale Udashi, and they got a degree in theology. Okay, so the demonstrations have showed no sign of abating. This is another good word. What does to abate mean? Yeah, it means to go down, to ease, to drop, okay? A-B-A-T-E, abate, okay? So many things could be, you could say his interest is abating, okay? The protests are abating. Anything that's kind of going down, it's dropping, it's falling, okay? Yeah, I think we could say the rain is abating. I think so. But this tends to get used more in this idea of not a physical force, but more of a interest or a protest or something like that. So why don't we say together, to abate. To abate. Abating. Abating. So it says the demonstrations have shown no sign of abatement. Means there's no sign that they're going down. They're still up or growing or the same. With people rallying, of course, to gather, crowding, coming together. We could say flocking, right? We learned the word flocking, right? We could say to rallying or flocking in residential areas, 住宅区, like a residential area, on major avenues, major road, and at universities nationwide, across the nation, nationally. Okay, so let's go on and see what's happening with this situation. So I'll read this. Iranians on Tuesday staged new protests to denounce the country's theocratic regime in defiance of a crackdown that has seen prominent figures arrested, and some even face the death penalty. Okay, so this is serious. Stage, of course, means to hold, right? I could say this weekend I'm staging a festival. I'm holding a festival. A stage is like a wutai, right? So if you stage something as a dongzi, it means you're holding or organizing something. So they're staged new protests to denounce. And we've talked about the word before. What does it mean? Yeah, someone said the word condemn. Condemn means to say something is bad, say something is wrong, right? CONDEMN, condemn. So you could say, I condemned his actions. I denounced his actions. That means I said that is bad or that is wrong. Okay? So let's say this together. Denounce. Denounce. Condemn. Condemn. Right. So when you say something is wrong, something is bad, something is not right. Criticize, yeah, you could say it's similar, but criticize is more of a general word, like peeping, right? But when you condemn or denounce something, it's a stronger word. You could say, well, I don't like what you're doing. I think that's the wrong way. But if you say that is wrong or that is evil or that is bad, that's when we say to condemn or that to denounce. Okay. So they denounced the country's theocratic, there's the word theocratic regime. Okay. Now, this word we've talked about before, I know. It's a French word. The G is a J sound. So we say regime. Let's say together, regime. Regime. And regime, as I said before, it's a government that is usually not democratic. It's not elected. So we use that word regime a lot for non-democratic or autocratic governments like China or North Korea or even Russia. We would say a regime. It's not a democracy. So you never hear that word used for something like Taiwan or the United States or Korea or South Korea. So this is a theocratic regime, okay, in defiance of. So there's a word defy, in defiance of. Okay, they did this in defiance of a crackdown that has seen prominent figures. Now, what's a prominent figure? Yeah. So, in Taiwan, of course, President Tsai Ing-wen is a prominent figure, but we could also say somebody like, I don't know, Wu Bai, is a prominent figure, right? Okay, so why don't we say together, prominent. Prominent. Okay, prominent means it stands out, right? Sometimes we say some people have a very prominent nose, right? If you say he has a very prominent nose, that means his nose is big, it stands out, or he's a very prominent person. It means he's very famous. Yeah. Okay, so prominent figures arrested, and some even face the death penalty. So they could even be put to death for this, for this during this crackdown. Okay. Now it says they face the death penalty. I don't think anyone's been executed yet, but they could face the death penalty. Okay. So let's read this. Iranians on Tuesday staged new protests to denounce the country's theocratic regime in defiance of a crackdown that has seen prominent figures arrested, and some even face the death penalty. Penalty. Right. Penalty, of course, is what you pay. Like, you can say, what is the penalty for being late? And someone might say, well, you have to stay 10 minutes late or later. Okay. The other day I was rushing to go to an opening of a new restaurant, and I parked my motorcycle on the sidewalk. I thought it was not on the road, but about 5 feet away there was a Hongxian, right? So when I came out, there was a little thing on my motorcycle, and my penalty was 600 kuai, right? So my penalty for parking there was 600 NT. Although I thought, well, I'm not actually, technically, I'm not on the red line. I'm over here, right? I'm on the sidewalk, but the police thought, of course, you're near the Hongxian. So I can't argue with them. Yeah. Okay. So it says here, Iran has been rocked by 6 weeks of protests of a scale and nature unprecedented since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Sparked, okay, here's that word, sparked by the death in the middle of September of Mahsa Amini, who, let's pull that up, had been arrested by the Tehran morality police. Now this is a very unusual term, right? Police are police, right? But we don't normally say morality. What does morality mean? Yeah, morals. Morals means good, right and wrong, good and bad, evil and holy or good, right? So, obviously, I think most people hope that they are moral. They act in a moral way. They act in the right way to do the right thing. But we don't normally say morality police, because morality is more like your thinking, your belief, your like almost religious belief. So police normally would, but of course, this is a theocratic government, right? So when you have a theocratic government or regime, it means that religion is your law, right? You follow, well, here it's Islam, right? A Muslim teaching, that's your government laws, okay? So that's why we have morality police. They're there to enforce people's morals, their morality or their moral behavior. So why don't we say together, morality. Morality. Right. So we could say someone has very good morals, or they are a moral person. MORAL, moral. Okay. So yeah. And of course, Tehran is the Shoudu, the capital of Iran. Okay, so rocked by, of course, rocked means shaken by, right? Just like we get rocked by earthquakes sometimes in Taichung or Taiwan, we can say we're shaken by, rocked by 6 weeks of protests of a scale. And what's another word for scale? Size, right? Size, I think is probably the best word. Of a size, you can say, what is the scale of your interest? What is the scale of that? The new shopping mall. What is the size of the new shopping mall? So of a scale and nature. Of course, nature means the nature of something means the character. Yes, very good. Character of something. Okay, so you could say, what is the nature of his interest? We could simply say the word character. What is the character of that book, or the nature of that book? Okay, so yeah, it's a similar word. So this is of a scale and nature or character unprecedented. And we've talked about this word many times. It means what? Never happened before. Okay, if there is a precedent for something, or it is precedented, it means it has happened before. But if something is unprecedented, it's never happened before. So it's unprecedented since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Of course, that is when this theocratic government came into power. I think many of you maybe remember that. The Iran hostage crisis, where they took a bunch of Americans hostage from the U.S. Embassy, where there was a lot of things went on back then. I still remember that. I was a small child, but I remember that. Okay, so why don't we say together Islamic Revolution. Okay, so all this was sparked by the death. Okay, now here we say the death of, but we say death in the middle of September of Mahsa Amini, who had been arrested by the Tehran morality police. Okay, so let's read this together. Iran has been rocked by 6 weeks of protest of a scale and nature unprecedented since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Let's say that last part once more. Islamic Revolution. Sparked by the death in the middle of September of Mahsa Amini, who had been arrested by the Tehran morality police. Okay, let's say it one more time. Tehran morality police. Yeah, I was just looking at this sentence here. I would say probably you could say sparked by the mid-September. I would take that and turn it into one word, mid-September, death of Mahsa Amini. Anyhow, I'm trying to compress that, make it smaller, shorter. Okay, so it says here, the authorities have warned protesters it is time to leave the streets, but the demonstrations have shown no sign of abating, with people rallying in residential areas on major avenues and at universities nationwide. That's what we read earlier. Okay, so let's read. Excuse me. The authorities have warned protesters it is time to leave the streets, but the demonstrations have shown no sign of abating, with people rallying in residential areas on major avenues and at universities nationwide. Okay, nationwide, yeah, we could say nationally or yeah. Yeah, okay. That's a photo caption. It says here, the challenge for the regime is compounded by the custom in Iran to mark 40 days since a person died. Wow, what's this? Turning every Chehalom, I don't know what that means, mourning ceremony for the dozens killed in the crackdown into a new potential protest flashpoint. I don't know what that word means. That's an interesting word. It's not English. It might be Iranian or Persian. I'm not quite sure. So anyhow, let's look at the rest of this. The challenge for the government, the regime, is compounded by. Okay, what does that mean, compounded by? Well, it doesn't necessarily, it could be doubled, but it means it's multiplied by, okay? So if something, you can say his problems were compounded by a lack of money, or his problems were compounded by his failure to ask for help. It means something is made worse by, okay? Basically, that's what it means. It becomes worse because of something, you know, 更严重, okay? It's compounded by, okay? So, you know, I like I said, you could say it's multiplied by, but I think it's just, we could say is made worse by something. Does everybody understand that? If something is compounded by something else, it means it's made worse, yeah? You could say complicated, but complicated is slightly different. Complicated means it's more 复杂, right? But compounded is almost like to multiply or make something even worse than it is before. Something could be complicated by or compounded by. So it's similar but slightly different. So why don't we say together, compounded by. Compounded by. Okay, so why the government's problem is made worse because of what? The custom, okay, the 风俗习惯, the tradition in Iran to mark 40 days since a person died. So I guess in their country, in their culture probably, at the 40-day mark, after somebody's died, you remember them. There's a special day of remembrance or something. So it means that turning again, I don't know what this word means. I should Google that. But chehalom, mourning ceremony. Okay, so this is mourning means to show sadness. Okay, ceremony. Okay, so when somebody dies, usually there is a mourning ceremony, a ceremony to mourn somebody, to show sadness that you missed them or you're sad about them dying or leaving. Okay, so mourning ceremony for the dozens killed in the crackdown. Okay, so every time, of course, it wasn't just this young woman who was killed. Many protesters have been killed. So every time there's one of these ceremonies, it turns it into a new potential protest flashpoint. And you know what flashpoint is, right? Flash, you know what flash? Yeah, we could say a trigger, but it's almost like a point of explosion, like a spark. We said, so you know what a flash is? A flash is a bright flash of light or explosion. So when you say a flash point, it's like, where did it start? What started it? The explosion. So we could say, there's various words we could use. We could say a spark, an explosion, a trigger, something that starts something big. So why don't we say it could a protest trigger, a protest explosion, a protest starting point. There's many different ways of saying that. So let's say together, flashpoint. Flashpoint. Okay, so if we said, what was the flashpoint for this war? What started the war? Where did it start? What was the flashpoint? You could say, oh, well, these two people started shooting at each other, or the flashpoint for this violence. Oh, they started arguing. Okay, so yeah. Does everybody understand that? Any questions on this paragraph? Okay. So yeah, because so many people have died, every time they recognize the 40 days since someone died, for all these people that have died, it could turn into a new, potentially, not always, but potentially could be a new protest when that happens. Okay, so let's read this. The challenge for the regime is compounded by the custom in Iran to mark 40 days since a person died. Turning every chehalom, mourning ceremony, for the dozens killed in the crackdown into a new potential protest flashpoint. Flashpoint. Right. So it says here, residents of the Tehran district of Ekbatan late on Monday shouted slogans, including "Death to the Dictator," while security forces used stun grenades against them. Footage posted on the monitoring site 1,500, whatever this means, and other outlets showed. Okay, so they shouted. What's a slogan? A chant. What's a Chinese word for this? I forget. Ko hao. Yeah, that's the word. Ko hao. Yeah, I always see. And right now, why do we hear lots of slogans in Taiwan? Why? Because of the what? What's happening soon? Election, right? Every time I drive, you hear people, every candidate, maybe not every candidate, but most candidates have a slogan. We say a campaign slogan, right? That represents their election, their campaign, right? So it might be like, I don't know, go Taichung, or, let's get better, or, what is Nike's slogan? Just do it, right? Companies have slogans too, right? I'm loving it, McDonald's, right? Thailand, Taigua, remember there was always amazing Thailand. That was actually, that's more of a 形容词. It's not so much of a slogan, but I'm loving it. That's a good slogan. It'd be interesting to, I'm sure if you study marketing, 行销, to read all the different slogans for big companies and what slogans and obviously, of course, often companies will change their slogans over time. But yeah, right now, because of the election in Taiwan, there's many, many slogans. I on my way here, every corner you see those election posters, right? Those, yeah, trust me, you can make it. Yeah, that's a slogan. Yeah, another one. I was, every time I look at the posters, my especially my foreign friends, they always think it's a little bit funny. Have you noticed not just the slogans, but the photos? They all have the same pose. Not all, but they all do this, or they do this, or they, my friends from America, they said, why are they doing this? It looks like they want to fight, like they want to start fighting with somebody. Yeah. Or I always see this one too. People do this, I don't know, chest bump, or I don't know what that is, but they always do this, but this, or yeah. It's kind of funny. So anyhow, why don't we say it together? Slogans. Slogans. Okay, so including death to the dictator. What's a dictator? Yeah, an autocrat. So we use the word autocratic, right? Or we could say that is an autocracy. But an autocrat would be a dictator, one person who runs a country. So right now we could say Putin is a dictator, basically, right? He controls the country. Everyone has to follow what Putin says. Of course, nowadays you could describe Xi Jinping as a dictator, right? He has complete control over his country. Okay, so why don't we say together, dictator. Dictator. Okay, now of course the word to dictate means you tell someone what to do. I dictated that he do this. It means I'm kind of ordering you to do something, right? To dictate. Okay, while security forces use stun grenades. Now what is a grenade? Yeah, you pull the pin and you throw it. But this is not a normal grenade. This is a special grenade that stuns people. If you're stunned, it's like you're shocked, right? So it's a special grenade. Usually it creates a loud sound or a light, a flash, and it stuns people, right? So it forces them to leave, hopefully. But yeah, it's not a grenade to kill somebody. It's a grenade to stun them, okay? So why don't we say together, stun grenades. Stun grenades. And the word here, of course, is very common. If you say, I was stunned by his words, okay? I was shocked by his words, okay? I was stunned when he told, stun gun. I don't know if Taiwan police use stun guns. Yeah, taser. American police use this a lot. You shoot somebody and it has electricity, right? And they can't move. They fall over. We call that a stun gun. Okay. So anyhow, stun grenades against them. Footage posted on the monitoring site, and this is just some name they have, and other outlets showed. Okay, so let's read this. Residents of the Tehran district of Ekbatan late on Monday shouted slogans, including death to the dictator, while security forces used stun grenades against them. Footage posted on the monitoring site monitoring site. Okay, we don't have to read that. And other outlets showed. Yeah, I don't even think that name is pronounceable. I don't even know what it, it's not obviously meant to be said. Okay, so here it says, Norway-based group Iran Human Rights said that students were on Tuesday staging a sit-in protest at Isfahan University, while social media footage indicated similar actions at other faculties in Tehran and Isfahan. Other faculties, okay. If you say faculty, F-A-C-U-L-T-Y, what does that normally mean? Yeah, teachers. So for example, if I say, how big is the faculty at your school? You might say, oh, we have 20 teachers. So faculty is your teachers, the people who are teaching. And that can be, that's a group, right? The faculty of our university faculty means our teachers or our professors, anyone who's teaching. So often when we talk about a school, we talk about faculty and staff. Now, staff, of course, the school has other people who work there that they're not teachers. Maybe they're a secretary, maybe they're someone who cleans up, maybe they help in the kitchen, but they are staff. They're not faculty. Faculty are only for teachers. So actions at other faculties in Tehran. So, but it's interesting because here it says students. So normally I would not include students within faculty. So I don't know. Maybe they're including everybody. But normally faculty would be a group of teachers at a school. Okay. So now they were staging a sit-in protest. What's sit-in protest mean? Yeah, you've seen this before. It's a very passive kind of protest. I use the word passive, right? There's active and passive. Sit-in protest means you just sit there and you don't move. You just sit there and maybe you're blocking something. Maybe you're sitting in front of the door, or you're sitting outside on the road, or you're sitting somewhere. But it's called a sit-in protest, okay? So that's a common form of protest. Okay. Okay, let's read this in. Norway-based group, Iran Human Rights, said that students were on Tuesday staging a sit-in protest at Isfahan University, while social media footage indicated similar actions at other faculties in Tehran and Isfahan. Isfahan. Yeah, I think that's another city. So of course, when we say media footage, what they're talking about is media video, like a social media video, like they showed not a picture, but a video. Whenever we use the word footage, we're talking about video. Like we say TV footage or movie footage or video, social media footage. It's a video. Okay, like someone, yeah. Okay. IHR, now IHR, of course, is this Iran Human Rights. IHR said a large number of people on Tuesday attended the 40th day mourning ceremony for protester Siavaj Mahmoudi, who, it said, was shot dead by the security forces. Wow, I don't know how to say this. At the Bahesht-e-Zahra cemetery outside Tehran, while chanting "Death to the Dictator." Now, I think you remember, what is a cemetery? What is that? Yeah, it's like another way of saying graveyard. Cemetery is a slightly more formal graveyard. Okay, cemetery, graveyard. So why don't we say it together? Cemetery. Cemetery. And then that word up there, graveyard. Graveyard. Yeah. You know, I think it's the Ayatollah. Ayatollah. I don't know how to pronounce it. Ayatollah. Ayatollah, again, is the religious leader, not the political leader, but the religious leader of Iran. So I don't know if you remember, maybe some of you who are older, in 1979, there was a very famous, the leader was Ayatollah Khomeini. That was his name. And he ruled Iran for many, many years. He was the one that called America. He said, America is the great Satan. You know, I don't know if you remember that. That was a very common term, the great Satan. You know, Satan is, devil. Yeah. So the great Satan. So yeah. So anyhow, Ayatollah Khomeini was the leader then. Ayatollah is a title. And so I forget the name of the Ayatollah right now, but I think that's probably who they're talking about. Now, remember, Iran does have a political leader. They also have a political leader, but the religious leader is more powerful. They're the one who really have the final word, the final say on everything. Okay, so this is I think, you know, it's interesting because if you've read about Iran before 1979 was a very modern, fairly open country. Very modern, very, you know, the Iranians. If you've ever met Iranians outside of Iran, and I know I've met a few, they come across to me. They come across as being very sophisticated, very westernized. You know, they're very, you know, they're very successful. Most Iranians I've met are like that, right? They're very. Actually, the word I would use is actually a word that we've learned before. If I was to describe them, I would say that most Iranians I've met are very, yeah, we could say that, but another word is, yeah, they're very cosmopolitan. You know, when I say cosmopolitan, means they're very sophisticated. You know, they know everything about you know, they're very confident. They're very good at, they dress very well. They act in a very cultured way. So that's the image I have of Iranians when I think of Iranians. And so I think, you know, with the younger generation, I'm sure the older generation too, but I think many Iranians, they don't really like living under this theocracy, right? This theocratic system, because obviously there's no freedom to act in a very cosmopolitan way. I think you know, they say you have to do this, you can't do this, you have these morality police. And so I think I get the feeling that younger Iranians are rebelling against this. They're defying this government. Now, I want to mention something else. We say Iranian, but this is a very old culture. What's the other word that we use to describe this culture, this country? Yes. Yeah. So yeah, let me just write that. Iran, the old name, the ancient name for Iran is Persia. So we could turn that into Persian, right? So when you think of 1,000 years ago, or, you know, we talk about Persia, the great society, the great empire of Persia. They actually had an empire that covered a lot of land, a lot of area. So yeah. So why don't we say it together? Persia, Persia, Persian, Persian. Okay. So anyhow, let's read this, and then I think that's all we have time for. IHR said a large number of people on Tuesday attended the 40th day mourning ceremony. Let's say the last part. Mourning ceremony for protester Siavaj Mahmoudi, who it said was shot dead by the security forces at the Behesht Izara cemetery outside Tehran, while chanting death to the dictator. Dictator. Right. Now, of course, when you are chanting, that means you're saying something over and over and over again, right? Sometimes if you go to a religious ceremony, like you go to a miao or temple or somewhere, and people are saying the same thing over and over again, we say they are chanting the same thing over. They're saying these same words over and over again. Okay, or maybe someone's protesting. Okay, so anyhow, that's all we have time for today. But once again, I hope to see you at a COMPASS Festival this weekend. Like I said, rain or shine, that means whatever the weather is, we will be there from 12 o'clock until about 9 o'clock in the evening. Lots of good food, lots of good drinks, lots of good music. So you're welcome to join me there. I'll be there both days. Yeah. So anyhow, if you need some cards or even if you need some posters, feel free to take some with you. Okay, thank you. We'll see you next time.